Andretti has been seeking an entry into Formula One for a while now, and they initially wanted to join the grid as soon as possible, so they were looking at a 2025 entry. But when it became clear that F1 wouldn't entertain this, they quickly switched to a 2026 entry and filed an official entry, which got accepted by the FIA. But then F1 and Liberty Media completely shut the door on them and denied any entry from Andretti or another team until further notice. And that was the end of it, you might think. But Andretti wasn't going to go down without a fight. And they now have support from the US itself in their quest to join the F1 grid as political interest in the matter has escalated. This resulted in the chairman of the United States House Judiciary Committee launching an investigation into Liberty Media's refusal to allow Andretti to take part in Formula One. Just days after Mario Andretti visited on Capitol Hill, Republican Jim Jordan wrote to F1's owners requesting an explanation for the decision-making process that has derailed Andretti's ambitions. Jordan wrote to Liberty CEO Greg Maffei and F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali, requesting answers to guarantee that no illegal anti-competitive activity occurred. Let's have a look at Jordan's letter and dissect which steps could be taken to get Andretti into F1 as soon as possible. But before we dive in, would you like to see Andretti join the grid? Jordan's letter stated the following. The Committee on the Judiciary is responsible for examining the sufficiency of federal competition laws to protect against monopolies and other unfair restraints on trade, he stated. Sports leagues, like Formula One, operate in a notable area of antitrust law in which some degree of collusion is necessary for the creation of the product. However, when a sports league deviates from its rules and practices in a manner that reduces competition and depresses consumer interest in the product, the collusion may amount to anti-competitive conduct. Jordan stated that he did not trust some of the arguments provided by F1 when it declared in January that it would not enable Andretti to compete on the Grand Prix grid. He wrote, "The excuses put forward for denying Andretti Cadillac's entry appear to be pretextual, arbitrary, and unrelated to Andretti Cadillac's suitability to compete in Formula One. For example, Formula One alleged that a new team could only add value to Formula One by competing for podiums and race wins. However, the FIA had already analysed and approved of the technical capabilities of Andretti Cadillac to compete among current teams. And most current teams in Formula One do not meet Formula One's standard of regularly competing for podiums and race wins. Formula One also faulted Andretti Cadillac for attempting to use an existing engine manufacturer because it could be damaging to the prestige and standing of Formula One. At the same time, however, Formula One stated that if Andretti Cadillac used a new engine manufactured by General Motors in the team's first year, a new engine would create a challenge for the new team. Formula One cannot have it both ways. The truth, as FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem explained, is that the rejection of Andretti Cadillac is all about money. The committee also believed that claims regarding an 11th team harming the interests of current teams suggested anti-competitive activity. The letter added, "Weak teams want to be protected from competition to the detriment of consumers, and an additional team would compete for prize money and sponsorships. If Formula One must hinder competition and harm consumers to protect failing competitors, then the entire Formula One model may be broken, and the entity cannot hide behind the necessity of a sports league to pursue anti-competitive conduct. Delaying Andretti Cadillac's entry into Formula One for even 1 year will harm American consumers to benefit failing Formula One teams." Jordan has requested papers and a staff-level briefing from F1 in order to aid the committee's inquiry into the matter. He has requested any papers and conversations pertaining to the process of reviewing new team entries, Andretti, and F1's decision to reject its entry on January 31st. Furthermore, he has demanded any papers and contacts between F1 and the 10 current teams about potential team entries, as well as any communications regarding new team entry or anti-dilution costs under the Concord Agreement. He has requested a briefing as soon as possible, and no later than May 21st. Speaking during a press conference outside the US Capitol last week, Mario Andretti said, "We've done everything that's been asked of us. I represented the US proudly in my F1 career. My proudest moments were standing on top of the podium with the American national anthem playing." Do you think Andretti have been unfairly declined by Liberty Media so that the current teams would stay happy? And what is next for Andretti and F1 during this period? Despite being stalled, Andretti has maintained its preparations, attempted a communication with Formula One management to try to persuade it to reconsider, and is assessing its options if that fails. Obtaining the political backing stated earlier looks to be critical to this. Andretti Global expressed satisfaction with the decision to probe Liberty and FOM's conduct, as F1's previous examination into Andretti yielded a resounding no to the application, whilst others said they would be an amazing asset to the grid. But F1 itself, and notably Liberty Media, established that an 11th team would not add value on its own, and that the most important way to do so would be to be competitive, which F1 has controversially predetermined Andretti would not be. F1 believes that the necessity for a mandatory power unit supplier, Andretti had a provisional Renault contract set up, which the French manufacturer no longer appears to be interested in, could harm the championship's status and standing. The rules state that an existing engine manufacturer will be picked to supply any team that cannot strike a deal on its own, so the implication is Andretti would be hamstrung by such an arrangement and potentially more compromised than a normal customer. While the Andretti name is well known among F1 fans, F1 decided it would provide value to the Andretti brand rather than vice versa, so they were against it. According to F1, adding an 11th team would increase the operational load on race promoters, incur considerable expenditures for some, and limit the technical, operational, and commercial areas of the other competitors. F1 also stated that it could not find any meaningful predicted beneficial impact on Liberty Media's financial performance, which are a vital measure of the championship's pure commercial worth. The parties have communicated, and a meeting was conducted in the weeks preceding up to Miami. This could have happened months ago when F1 wrote to Andretti in December, inviting him to an in-person meeting at their offices to submit his application. But Andretti did not accept F1's offer, citing a lack of awareness of the invitation when the email wound up in a junk folder. Despite the fact that in-person meetings have finally begun, there has been little genuine progress. Andretti is thought to have verified that their application is entirely about 2026, despite originally making a lot of fuss about 2025, which was one of F1's grounds for rejecting it. However, Andretti is adamant on entering in 2026. It views participating in 2026 and 2027 as an essential step before introducing the GM Works engine in 2028. F1's position has not changed fundamentally, hence the standoff persists. The as-yet fruitless conversation may have fostered political meddling in the United States. Meanwhile, Andretti has chosen a preferred narrative that it is proceeding at pace with its ambitions, which include the establishment of a UK facility to operate alongside its core location in Indiana, as well as other facilities such as GM's Technology Center. Andretti's rejection from F1 earlier this year did not fully rule him out. There was a chance for 2028. That is when the project would use a GM Works engine, and F1's official view is that it would seem differently on that type of program. But that's extremely simple to say today in order to push the can down the road, silence Andretti, and then never follow through. Especially because, in its original rejection of Andretti, F1 reasoned that an inexperienced constructor working with a new engine supplier would face substantial challenges. It also noted that the majority of attempts to build a new constructor during the previous few decades have failed. However, it is possible that F1 was just acknowledging the issue and would be convinced by the importance of introducing an established new manufacturer to the league. It is also worth noting that the initial declaration of interest was for 2025, 2026, or 2027. That means the FIA would most likely have to reopen the entire process, giving those teams that were initially rejected, such as High Tech, another shot. Another aspect that might become important is talk about a plan to include a maximum 10-team grid in the Concord Agreement. This has not been openly recognised by F1 or the existing teams, and it is unlikely that F1 would support it, implying that the suggestion originated with one or more of the current competitors. Capping the grid in the commercial agreements inked between F1 and the teams would make the idea that F1 is a closed business a reality. Right now, F1 can legitimately, although barely, argue that it is not inherently opposed to extending the grid because the applicable legislation and economic frameworks allow for more teams to participate. Removing that would be a poor look as well as self-defeating. If a desired manufacturer-backed team was ready and prepared to enter Formula One, the championship would be forced to turn it down. As a result, this is now seen as an unlikely event. The fundamental question is if F1 is serious with its 2028 proposition and whether Andretti is ready to call F1's bluff and see what happens. And whether the US involvement will help them join the grid even before that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below.